this last video is covering something that we don't actually do very much in this course at this minute because we're looking at how things are working. But when you're writing a good function, you need to think about the comments as well. So a comment is kind of a description of what your code is doing, and it can have a few purposes. One, to explain what your code is doing, both to your future self and to other people reading this code. But secondly, in Python, there's a lot of programs that will actually create you auto documentation from your code. So if you're writing a larger project and you want to do auto documentation, you need to pick which program you're going to use for that and do the code accordingly to that, because each one has a way of doing it. And then all you do is you run that on your code and it produces a document explaining what it is. So comments are vitally important. Less so when you're learning and just doing little examples, but more so when you're writing larger code that other people are using. So I'm going to show you how to do this in a definition. So we're going to set up a definition of first two items in a list. Which does what it says on the tin. It takes the first two items from a list. And we're going to put a list into here, colon, and return with that tab in it. So the comment is the next thing that you put in, and this should explain what your function is doing. So some of the auto creation documentation will expect it to be in quotes. You just explain what the function does. So it takes the first two items from a list. And then you just carry on as normal. So my answer is my list, and I'm just taking the first two. So we need to go 0, 1, and 2, which I know it counts up to 3, but remember it takes one less than we've asked for. And return our answer. So if we run that into the document, and then let's test it out. My list is equal to, easy thing to type out, 1 to 5, run it, so I'll get my answer. First two items in the list, acting on my list, print out answer. Underscore. What have I done there? First two items list. Missed an S first. And when you correct your spelling errors, you can see that this literally takes the first two elements and prints them when you ask it to. And this comment line is just ignored. So as I said, for the auto documentation stuff, quite often it wants it in quotes or double quotes or maybe 3 lots of quotes. You can also do this with a normal comment in Python as well. So if you're not using the auto documentation, but you're writing a slightly longer piece of code and you want to explain what it is. So I'll show you that on one more example. So we're going to calculate area. Again, it says what it does on the tin. I'm going to have a simple interface, and you're going to put in what needs to go into it, the width and the length, colon and return. Then I'm going to put a comment as normal in Python, which is a hash. And I'm going to say this calculates area from width and length. Excellent. And then calculate my area, literally from times in the two together. And I'm going to return area. Not in capitals, so there we go. Oh, and immediately I can see that I really can't spell return. So that's going to give you an error. Go, let's just correct that before I even try. I'm going to set my width to 4 and my length to 6 and get rid of that space. And I did say 4, not 45. And I'm going to use my function. I'm going to calculate area, give it the width and the length, and run that. And put an E in calculate. So it's still saying calculate area is not defined, which means I've spelt it wrong. I've got an extra. Oh, I've spelled it wrong up here. Calculate area. There we go. 4 times 6 is 24. Okay, so that's a couple of ways that you can put comments in your function. And when you get a bit further down and when you're doing more than one function in the code that you're working on, it's a really good thing to do. So try and get in the habit of doing that as you're going along. Comments are an excellent thing to use in your code as general, just to explain what's going on, both to yourself now and in the future, and for someone else that might be using your code. Okay, so we've got to the end of how to write a good function, and this is not just Python specific, this does cover all programming languages. So remember, the function should do what it's meant to do and should work. It does one job, it has a very clearly defined purpose. Your function names are descriptive, they're clear what they're doing. You have a simple interface with just what's there that needs to be there in the inputs and the outputs. And you can add the comments and auto-create the documentation from there if you so wish. Okay, so we've completed that section. When you're ready, move on to the next video to continue.